Hello. Right, let's see if we are live. And we are live. Welcome everyone. Let me show you my face. So we've got 5 minutes before to officially get started. We're just waiting for everyone to connect. You fluent in everything after a few drinks? Well, same here. But I think it does actually, because we feel more comfortable, we do actually speak better languages. Hi Candace, welcome. Welcome Monique Angel. So we've got 4 minutes before to start. If any of you were watching us on replay and you wanted to skip the hellos, you can skip the next 4 minutes. Hi Joy. Welcome. Welcome to the embankment. Welcome Sarah Penter. Hi Laurie, hi Lauren. So we are on the embankment and it is 4 minutes to 9 p.m. in London. Let me show you a bit of the view. Welcome Cheryl. So the sun has just gone, we're right after sunset. Welcome Amanda, nice to have you here. Welcome Carol Sue. Thank you Carol. You haven't drunk in a while. What are you waiting for? We've got one of those Uber boats going into Embankment Station there. That's what I do pretty much, Embankment Pier I should say. That's what I do pretty much every morning when I do a tour starting at the tower and taking the boat. Hi Tish. Welcome Manimo. Well, not every morning. I often do the changing of the guards as well. Because she's not always been the most popular lady, so when she sees a tour guide on a group, she always waves. So that's great because she waves, and then I get amazing reviews. So you know, Uberboat, yeah, Katie. They used to be called the Thames Clippers. Well, technically they are still the Thames Clippers, but they have a partnership with Uber. It's not like a Uber, like a boat that belongs to somebody and you jump on. It's basically a company. Welcome Heather in the Twin Cities. Welcome LS, nice to have you here. How many times a week do you have to go to the changing of the guards at Buckingham Palace? Well, it depends if I work, it depends how many days I work, but usually it's on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, and I'm often there. And in the summer, for a few weeks, starting next month, it's gonna be every day. Hi Candace. And Sam is here. Welcome Sam. And welcome everyone that I did not greet. We've got 1 minute to go. 1 minute before we officially get started. Baltimore, nice. Welcome Linda. Hi Kurt. Welcome. So we've got 1 minute to go. And there's an aircraft above us. Oh, a helicopter as well. And welcome Lethargy. Hi Rose, welcome. And it is officially time to go. So welcome everyone. Just a bit of housekeeping before we start. You've got the chat, feel free to use it, ask me any questions. If you are watching this live, if you want to make sure that you are indeed live, you want to check the bar at the bottom, because on YouTube you have the option to kind of pause, and sometimes you are a few minutes delayed. Then the chat might be very confusing if you're commenting 6 minutes delayed or anything. So if you want to make sure you are live, check the bar at the bottom. If you touch the screen now, you have a long red bar. If you see a bit of gray, it should be on this side. If you see a bit of gray, you're not live. So you want to move the cursor to make sure you are all red. And for the ones that don't know me, I'm Nathalie. If you're new to me, you're very welcome. Right, let's go. So I'm here on the embankment. I am by the Cleopatra's Needle. Oops, I nearly fell down the steps. So this is the Cleopatra's Needle is actually our oldest monument in London. It is about 3,500 years old. It dates back to the time of Thutmose III, and it is from Egypt. It has been gifted to Britain by Muhammad Ali, not the Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali was the ruler in Egypt at the beginning of the 19th century. It was given as a gift to say thank you to the Napoleonic War. Gift back for now, so we'll keep it there. And they only brought it back to London about 60 years later. They had, yeah, it's a cool gift. There's a sister one in New York as well, and one in Paris. So yeah, 60 years later, they created a little ship called Olga to bring the, just gonna wait. So they created a little ship to bring it back, to ship it back to the UK, but there was a disaster. The ship sank, and it was, the needle was rescued by another ship that took it on board. And would you believe, they actually asked for a ransom to the British government. They were like, hey, we've rescued your needle, now you're gonna have to pay for it. And they did. It cost them $250,000 in today's money. And finally they took it on a different ship that was called Cleopatra, and they brought it here. And the Sphinx, they are fake, you know, they are not original from Egypt, they are decoration. And they are looking the wrong way around. You know, if you go to Egypt, the Sphinx are kind of protecting the sculpture, the structure, so they are looking out. Well, those ones, apparently, I read that originally they put it looking out, then they removed them to clean them, and they put it back the wrong way around. So now they're looking at the monument. Why not? And the inside the needle, the obelisk, it's actually a Greek word for an Egyptian structure. Inside the foundation, you've got a time capsule. They have placed a few clay pipes, cigars, a manuscript with my favorite. They placed 12 photos of the most beautiful ladies of the time. I'd like to see who, I don't think we know who's been featured. And I'd like to know who we would feature now if we had to choose the 12 most beautiful ladies in Britain. I would say personally, I would put Anna Richardson in there. When we talk about Cleopatra, we usually talk about Cleopatra the Seventh, the one that it was pronounced Kaiser. So that's how we got the name for the Kaiser in Germany, of course, or the Tsar in Russia. When I did the research for that tour, how did I spend 35 years without knowing that? But yeah, not Katie Price. Well, I don't actually think we could do that today. You know, you'd have a lot of feminists that would be like, what? You know? But yeah. And the bridge straight ahead, we often call it the Jubilee Bridge. Technically, it's middle. It's the Hungerford Bridge, but a lot of people call it the Charing Cross Bridge now. And the two little bridges, pedestrian on each side, they're the Jubilee Bridges. You might have heard about that bridge if you followed my tour in Brockley on Ladywell Cemetery, when we talked about a chap called Larry Donovan. That was a bit of a sensation in the press in America because he was jumping off bridges, and then he moved to London and he jumped off the Clifton suspended. He wanted to go back to America, pounds to nothing, that he would jump off the Hungerford Bridge. So he jumped in the middle of the night. He came back to the surface for a few seconds, but then he disappeared again. And he was actually swimming towards the needle, but then he disappeared. And very sadly, they found his body 2 days later in Deptford. And his so-called friends with whom he had made the bet, well, they disappeared. They just ran away. So it's quite sad. It really shows you that, you know, quick notoriety, it's not new. You know, it's already happened back in the day with the press. And we are now, so on the embankment here, we actually are standing on top of the sewage system. Back in the days, all of this land was, it was water. The river was much larger than it is today. And what happened, let me cross, I shouldn't cross the cyclist here, they go very quick. What happened is the Thames was smelling very bad. In 1858, we had what we called the Great Stink. The smell of the river was unbearable because people used to drop anything in there, you know, human waste. For many centuries, it was not so much of a problem because London was not that busy. But in Victorian times, with the Industrial Revolution, so many people moved into the city. There was just way too much poo in the river. And they had to commission Joseph Bazalgette to reclaim some land over the river to create the sewage system. And it's still the same system we're using today. Well, they're actually working on it at the moment because the system that Bazalgette created was designed to overflow into the river in case of flooding or just too much. Back in the days, that was about twice a year. Today, apparently, it's twice a week. So that's why they had to enlarge it. They are working on the super sewer at the moment. Anyway, let's go into the station. We are here in Embankment, and there's a very romantic story here in Embankment. If you've ever visited London and if you've ever taken the Underground, you might have heard the announcement back in the days. It used to go, "Mind the gap, mind the gap." You should see the funny looks I'm getting. That was the voice of an actor called Oswald Lawrence. It was recorded in the 60s, and the voice was on for decades. Originally, they had tried to commission another actor, but it didn't go down well because they realized that they were going to have to pay royalty fees every time it was played. So that was like hundreds of times a day. So they gave up on the first actor. They used the voice of an engineer, and then they commissioned Oswald. And everyone knew that voice. It was on forever. But from the year 2000, they started to, they had a woman too. Well, the voice of the woman mystery, it's actually more recent. Nowadays, it's a lady. She goes, "Please mind the gap between the train and the station, the train and the platform." Well, technically, Oswald was on the Northern Line. There were some different voices, but he was the most famous. So the voice was being changed to the lady's voice from station to station. The actor is long dead. Well, 2007, I think he died. And his widow, Margaret, she used to love coming into London because she could hear the voice of her late husband in the Underground. And eventually, in 2012, they changed it here as well to the lady's voice. And Margaret was gutted, so she sent a letter to TfL. TfL is Transport for London. She kindly asked them if they would be kind enough to send her a CD of the recording. TfL said no. They could not be bothered. They said no. And then they changed their mind. They were like, oh, that's such a romantic story. They looked into the archive. They found the old tape. They digitalized it. They sent Margaret a CD. And they've decided that here in Embankment, on the northern branch of the Northern Line, they'll play it again. So now it's the only station where you can still hear the original "Mind the Gap." I know it's a funny phrasing. I think in British English we use mind much more than you do in America. I suppose on the other side of the pond you'll probably say "watch the gap" rather than "mind." Anyway, we are now in front of a little cab shelter or a tea hut, or what was it I read? A street refectory. Those are amazing Victorian Hackney cab shelters. The story behind them, it's that, you know, the taxi drivers, today they are like this one here, the black cab, but back in the days they used to be on horseback, you know, on carriages. And during the coronation we had the King and the Queen doing the announcement. Really? Oh, I never knew, Kurt. That's cool. So yeah, those cabs, they used to be on horseback, and the costumers were sheltered, but sadly the driver was not. He was exposed to the elements, so he would get very wet, very cold, and he didn't have a shelter, you know. So sometimes when they had no costumers, they used to hide in a pub, and they needed water for the horses as well. So sometimes they'd go in the pub and they ask for a bowl of water. And eventually the pub owners, they were like, no, that's enough. If you want some water for your horses, if you want my shelter, you're gonna have to grab yourself a drink. So would you believe we had a bit of an issue with a lot of taxi cabmen that were a bit drunk, those horse and carriages. So they had to find a solution. And the solution came with a philanthropist that created those little tea huts. So that was amazing for the cabmen because they could attach the horses outside. Because when they went to the pub, they had to pay someone to watch out for the horses. Because if they left them alone, they'll be stolen really. And in the tea hut, you had a cook, so you could buy some food, or you could also bring your own food, and the cook would cook it for you. And there were only the taxi drivers inside. Still today, most of them are closed today. We used to have 61. We've got only 13 left, and they are listed, so they are part of our heritage. We're not allowed to destroy them. Some of them are in a very awkward position, but we're not allowed to remove them. And that one that we've seen just now, it's actually still open at daytime. You could queue to buy yourself a coffee at the window, and it's usually much cheaper than a Starbucks or anything, but you are not allowed to sit inside unless you are a cab driver. Or Winston Churchill. I know he had done it, but he was one of the most popular men in the country. So you love the boxes repurposed for Wi-Fi. Yeah, some of them are. And outside of London, sometimes some of them are equipped with a defibrillator. So if you have to come to call the emergency services, they can direct you to the defibrillator in the phone boxes. Those taxi drivers, by the way, today, they are amazing. If you have to take a cab when you are in London, I highly recommend taking a black cab compared to a Uber or anything, because those taxi drivers, they have to take an exam. It's called the Knowledge. It was created in 1850, and at the time, they had to know every single street in 6 miles radius of the Charing Cross. We'll talk about the Charing Cross in a moment. So that was already quite a few streets at the time. Today we're talking about 25,000 streets. So they have a very good memory. And actually I've read a study that said that most of them on average their IQ is slightly higher than most of us. So yeah, they're amazing because they're a bit like a tour guide, you know, they know a lot. And yes, you're right, Michelle. Some of those telephone boxes are sometimes used by gentlemen as a public toilet at night. In central London, in the locations quite close to the clubs and everything, sometimes they actually sealed them so no one urinates inside. Oh, you've got defibrillator in your village? Yeah. In London, we don't really, because we already have a defibrillator in any train station, shopping center, underground station, so there's no need to have that many more, but yeah. Anyway, we have a lovely little pub here called the Sherlock Holmes. It's actually connected to one of the stories I've told you recently. Some of you might have been with me in my tour about Thomas Neal Cream, you know, the serial killer that was targeting sex workers with poison. He was giving them pills. Well, what I did not tell you through that tour, it's that, you know, he was caught mainly because of the case of Lou Harvey. He killed a prostitute, or he believed he did. He met her on the embankment. He gave her 2 pills that were strychnine poison, and she actually did not take them. She dumped them over her shoulder, and he believed she did. He believed he had killed her. And well, what I didn't tell you is that after that day, they actually met again, but Cream was so high. He was really intoxicated. He used to take a lot of opium, and apparently he came into that pub. At the time it was called the Northumberland Arms. He had a drink with Lou Harvey. He did not even recognize her. So technically he had a drink with a ghost. All white, like if he had seen a ghost. Anyway, the location that was the habitation at some point of a gentleman that you might have heard of. Let me show you. So this is Benjamin Franklin's house. Benjamin Franklin, I'm sure most of you know about him. He was one of the founding father of the United States. Or the other way around. So he lived in London at some point in 1757, I think it was, and he lived right here. Today it's a little museum. It's quite cool. You can choice of pills. Ooh, I wouldn't want to take a pill in the cabby. But yeah, so he lived here. If you don't know Benjamin Franklin, let me show you his photograph. Well, not a photograph, it's a $100 note. He's not actually a president. Usually on the $100 note, it's American presidents. But so what I wanted to tell you about, it's not so much about his time here, but in 1998, they wanted to do some work in the garden to make it look a bit nicer, and they found well, a little basement that they didn't know what was there, and a lot of human remains. We're talking about 15 sets of bones, 6 of them being children, over 1,200 bones. So, and they were dating back to the time of Benjamin Franklin, and at the time we were like, what happened here? Was he a serial killer? What, you know? And the coroner decided not to start any inquest or anything, because the bones were more than 100 years old anyway. The archaeologists actually did not have much time to collect everything because they wanted to do the improvement. And we believe it doesn't have much to do with Franklin. There was another chap called William Hewson that lived here as well. He was, I think, the step of the landlady, and he was an anatomist. He was a surgeon, and we believe he was having a secret anatomy school in the basement. Hewson, he studied with William Hunter in Edinburgh, but then they had a fight. They kind of fall apart. Well, William Hunter was fighting with everybody anyway. And so yeah, he might have had his secret anatomy school in the basement. Well, I say might, it's pretty sure, because we know that William Hewson was actually studying the lymphatic system, and he was known to have done an experiment on turtles, injecting mercury into turtles, and they did find part of a turtle shield with some mercury, so it's pretty sure that's what happened. Right, so this is the only pub in London that I know of divided into two. Let's go straight through. Lived there 16 years, yeah. Then he went back, I believe, to America. Right, we are now under the station, and there's a nightclub here. You'll see some stuff. That's called Heaven. It's quite a good gay club. They have a night on a Monday called Popcorn, and they have a night on a Thursday called Porn Idol. Porn Idol, it is pretty much what you imagine. It is basically, they have a lot of people already coming into the club very intoxicated because they partner with a club called JY in Soho, where the drinks are particularly cheap. And what they do is that you can register to do a striptease on stage in front of hundreds of people for free. So that's just nuts. I don't even understand why people do it. I think it's just because they are drunk. And then you might win. You could be the best. You could be the best naked person and win like 200 quid or something. It's quite fun, but to be honest, I always feel a bit sad because I feel like it's kind of abusing the drunkenness of people, because when they wake up in the morning and they see all the videos of them naked on social media or whatever, they probably regret. But yeah, I think it's been on for years, Porn Idol on a Thursday. We're quite close to Soho, so a lot of people go in Soho first and then they come down to Heaven. Yeah, intoxicated. Well, I say intoxicated because of course there's alcohol, but there are some other substances going around sometimes. Anyway, let's wait until the bin guys go away. And talking about gay men, we are going on Buckingham Street. The Duke of Buckingham, the first Duke of Buckingham, was a chap called George Villiers. We believe he was the lover of James I. You might know James I was, well, we tend to say that he was openly bisexual. It's not that clear, you know. He did have a few favorites, but, you know, like any king, he had a lot of enemies. None of his enemies ever publicly accused him of sodomy, so we do not know for sure. But he definitely had a few favorites, and George Villiers was one of them, so he made him Duke of Buckingham. And all this site belonged to the Duke. He had a very large house here called York House. And when they decided to destroy it to kind of redo the area, the Duke of Buckingham only agreed at one condition, is that the streets here would be named after him. So you've got Duke Street, Off Street, Buckingham Street, and George and Villiers Street. My favorite is Off Street. So that was renamed because, yeah, it was quite ridiculous anyway. So that's why it's named after the Duke of Buckingham. And we had a couple of famous people living here. One of them is a painter, William Etty. He was very well known for doing nudes. At the time, they were very titillating. Nude, female and male. So he lived just here, the White Building. And apparently, they said that in the building there's the ghost of a naked lady. She's probably one of his models, or was one of his models at some point. I love those ghost stories, but I think some of them are a little bit more believable than others, you know. But yeah, I wish she would come out, but oh no, actually, because then I would have to be over 18 on YouTube. No, stay in. And there was another chap that lived here as well. You might have heard of him, Samuel Pepys. So Samuel Pepys, you probably know him from the diaries. He was a great chronicler of his times. You know, he lived through the Great Fire of London, the King coming back, Charles II, the plague. And these diaries, especially if you are from the UK yourself, you might have read part of it at school. I don't suppose you would have read the full version though. There's two versions. There's a version that's been a bit censored and a full one, because Pepys was a bit of a perv, to be honest. When you read the full version, there are some episodes where he's like talking about perving at some girls at church, touching girls on the street, so probably not very consensual, and even kissing the body of the dead queen that was laying in state, and perving on the petticoat of the king's mistress and stuff. So interesting read. Anyway, we are now by the York Watergate. Would you believe this is 400 years old? 1626, if I'm right. So that was the river would come all the way here. I mentioned earlier that the river was much larger, about 100 meters larger than it is today. So let me show you what it would have looked like at the time. So that's what it looked like back in the days. So that was part of York House, and that's where the Duke of Buckingham would have parked his boat and everything on his way into his house. Oh, thank you, Chantel. And this is, by the way, Gordon's wine bar. The terrace is cool, but the inside is even nicer. Some people call it the tavern that time forgot. It's, well, actually, I said that I've not been inside for like 14 years, maybe. I had some friends back in the days that used to work inside, but I don't like wine. I'm a terrible French. I don't like wine. I don't like cheese. But if I remember right, when you go down, you have some old newspaper cutting, you know, like from the 40s or whatever. It really feels like you're going back in time, you know. And it's quite a cool place if you like your wines. Yes, London's oldest wine bar. Anyway, let's head towards the station, Charing Cross station. The Charing Cross, by the way, it is well, we had a set of crosses, 12, although some historians believe it might have been up to 15. When Eleanor de Castile died, she was Eleanor the Queen Consort. She married Edward I, and she was, so that was a big love story, those two. You know, we know that because there's a few references of the king never having a mistress. A king never having a mistress? How is that possible? So yeah, and she was a very powerful business lady. She used to deal with Jewish loans and stuff like that. Some people didn't really like her for that. And she was half French. You might have heard, that's actually a bit of an urban myth. Many tour guides even say that, but that's not true. Some people say that Charing Cross was actually named after Charing Cross, because she was half French. I know it sounds exciting, but it's not true. Charing, it's actually old. It's an old Saxon term coming from the bend into the river. So it's not after Charing. Charing is dear queen. And so yeah,
Barrett is over there performing.
So that's why we still have a cross today, but it's a replica, not an exact replica. It's actually very different. Yeah, it's very busy. Some of you that might have done that tour with me before, it was a bit later on a Sunday, so it was much quieter. Today it's midweek, so it's the beginning of the weekend. So that's the Charing Cross there. The artist is Ian Berry, and let's have a little look inside the station. We might be kicked out because they don't really like filming in the station, but just so you can take a quick look. And guess what? We have a murder story. In May 1927, we had at the time in Charing Cross station, you had a luggage facility. You had the opportunity to bring your luggage if you wanted to leave it there for a few hours or a few days, like just a luggage facility. And apparently, I'm gonna wait until she stops. So there was a larger suitcase that had been deposited at the luggage facility that was there for days, and the staff believed it smelled a bit full. So he believed there was something dodgy with the suitcase. So they called the police, they opened the suitcase, and they found the dead body, the dismembered lady in the suitcase. They had no idea who she was at first, but she had her underwear had a little tag. You know, back in the days we often had a little tag with our name on the underwear, and it said P. Holtz. So the police was actually able to locate a Patricia Holtz in Chelsea, and they contacted her. She was very well alive. So they were a little confused, and they asked her if she believed anyone could have taken some of her underwear. And she said, yeah, she did indeed have a maid that left, that she could have stolen some of the underwear. Her name was Mrs. Rolls. So the police looked for Mrs. Rolls. They could not actually find her, but they did find a girl called Minnie Bonatti that was also known as Mrs. Rolls. She had separated from her Italian partner. She was a sex worker. Well, after leaving her job in service, she was selling her body. And oh, you've seen the underwear at the museum? Oh, that's cool. And they, we were talking earlier about those cabbies and their amazing memories, right? Well, the police had a name for the victim, they had a suitcase, but how would they locate the murderer? So they showed the suitcase to many taxi drivers, and they were like, do you remember ever transporting anybody with that suitcase? And one driver said, yes, and I picked it up from 86 Rochester Row, that's in Pimlico, Victoria. So not only did the driver remember the very suitcase that he carried, but he remembered the exact address where he picked it up from. So that's amazing. They do have most of them have a very, very good memory. So that's how they ended up there. They caught the guy. He was an estate agent, 35 years old, I think. Robinson, his name was. They interrogated him. He very quickly confessed, but he claimed that it was an accident. They had a bit of an argument, and she banged her head. And actually, there were some evidence that she had been strangled, so the chap was hanged. So yeah, interesting story, and he could, interesting way to dispose of a body, really, when you could have done anything with it. No, let's bring it into one of the busiest train stations in London, why not? Anyway, we are now in front of Coutts Bank. It is a private bank. That's where King Charles keeps most of his money. The bank has a very long royal connection. You might have heard the name Coates when we were in St. Pancras. When I did a tour, we talked about Angela Bordet Coates. The bank was created by Thomas Coates, and well, guess what? They used to have a ghost. What happened here is that, well, the story really came out in the 90s. There was a ghost in the building. A lot of the staff refused to come to work because apparently they felt like they were being watched. They felt like there was a ghost. And one staff in particular, she saw a ghost without a head. And eventually it became so big that the manager decided to invite a psychic, a medium, to have a little seance to see if they could get the ghost away. So the medium, his name was Eddie Burke. He came here, and apparently he did come up with a name. He believed the ghost was the 4th Duke of Norfolk. And the Duke of Norfolk had indeed been beheaded. It was because he was trying to marry Mary Queen of Scots and take over the throne from Queen Elizabeth the First. And so the actual Duke of Norfolk, the one, well, I don't know if it's still the same one, he might have died now, but the Duke of Norfolk from the 90s, he agreed with the manager of the bank. They had a little ceremony in the Catholic Church in Covent Garden to basically put his ancestor to rest, to kind of release the ghost. And they did the ceremony, and at the exit of the church, there's a journalist that spotted the Duke, and he's like, Sir, how does it feel putting your great ancestor to rest? And the Duke of Norfolk just looked at the journalist and he said, I don't believe in ghosts. So he had played along with them, but he didn't. He did not believe in ghosts for 1 second. And while we're here, we've got a statue of Oscar Wilde, but it is also used as a bench. It's an interesting style. Hello. It's from an artist called Maggie Humbling. She always has a style that's a little bit interesting. Some people don't like it. Some people say that it was even uglier than the portrait of Dorian Gray. I don't mind it. It's original, let's say. And this is St. Martin's in the Field. And we have a urinal there. Look what it says. 24 hours, urinals only. What does that mean? Does that mean no poo-poo, no drugs, no sex? Urinals only, 24 hours. Anyway, so that's the church itself, St. Martin's in the Field. It is named after St. Martin's of Tours. Some of you were with me in Tours a month ago in France. So we talked about him down there. And the statue, not the urinal. Oh, I've missed something in the chat, I think. So yeah, St. Martin's of Tours, he was an early precursor in terms of monastic life. He used to be a Roman soldier, and he became a saint. And St. Martin's in the Field, by the way, it was rebuilt by Henry VIII. The original one, it's in the 13th century, but it was rebuilt by Henry VIII because Henry used to have a massive palace here, the Palace of Whitehall. It would go down all the way from Trafalgar Square to almost the Building of Parliament today. And when there was the plague in London, he did not want anyone to have to go down to church, to go down to Westminster Abbey or St. Margaret Church, because those guys might have the plague. So to avoid them walking in front of his palace, he rebuilt the church. Smart, quite a smart isolating solution. And it was a spot for the body snatchers. They kind of went fishing everywhere, right? But that was one of their favorite spots as well, because the bodies could have been sold to John Hunter, he had a school of anatomy in Leicester Square as well, or it could have been sold to William Hewson, where we were earlier. They were also after the in the 17th century, they also did executions by the Charing Cross. So the bodies that were dissected at the secret school of anatomy that we've seen earlier, they could have come from the body snatchers, of course, and probably they did because there were quite a few kids. But they could also have come from the executions. That's quite sad, but in the 18th century, there were sometimes some kids being executed as well. So the fact they were children doesn't really prove that they were stolen. Yeah, oops, sorry. And let's go and take a look at a few haunted theatres. So we are now on St. Martin's Lane, again named after St. Martin's of Tours. And it's very busy. It's very busy because it is part of Theatreland. So you have a lot of people coming here for a show or for a night in a restaurant. Yes, the station was to my left. Yeah. So this is the Colosseum Theatre. I love the doors, beautiful doors. They have a ghost as well, but they've not been any sighting for decades. There was a ghost story through the First World War. Apparently a soldier that passed fighting the war, and he was seen in the theater the very night he died, and apparently there were a few sightings in the next few years, but I didn't find much details about the story. I prefer stories with a lot of details, like the one across the street. So the Duke of York Theatre across the street there, they have, there's a story of a ghost as well, a former landlady, but again, not very precise. But let me just show you my face for a second, so I don't film too many people right in their faces. And I'm gonna try to see a spot. It looks like they're literally just coming out of the theater right now. I just don't like to have people right on camera. Anyway, so they have a cursed or haunted bolero jacket. There's a story apparently in the 40s. There was a play that was played here called The Queen Came By, and in the outfit that they used on stage, there was a little bolero jacket that had been bought in a second-hand shop, a Victorian jacket, and the actress that wore it on stage, she felt really uncomfortable, like if her rib cage was restricted, like if the jacket was almost trying to strangle her. She did not speak about it much because she believed it was, she might have been stressed and it might have been herself. And then there was a night when she wasn't there, and there's another actress that played the role, and the other actress commented on it. So they were like, okay, there must be something there. And one night they organized a séance. They invited 3 mediums to take part, and that was on stage as well, so you had an audience and everything. That was probably more interesting than the play, to be honest. 2 of the mediums did not really have any feelings or any sightings or anything, and the third one, oh yes, he had a full vision. He basically saw a lady that felt somehow, she looked like she felt guilty of something, and then a guy that basically drowned her. He drowned her, he undressed her, and he carried the body away. And as the medium says that, the actress, she said, oh, I've had the same vision. That's just crazy, I've had the same vision. And then they decided to invite some strangers. They went down to Trafalgar Square to invite completely innocent strangers. They approached a couple, a boy and a girl, and they asked her to wear the jacket. And the girl did not feel much, but the boyfriend, he said his arm, it was kind of like if he wanted to grab her and if he wanted strangle her. Nowadays, the whereabouts of the jackets are unknown, but we believe it has been bought by an American. So be careful if you go into a charity shop or any second-hand shop in America. Just be careful. A ghost, yes. Anyway, that's gonna be the end of the tour. Let me know if you did have any questions for me. I'm just moving away from the busy area. You checking your closet as you type. Amazing. Thank you, Janie. Thank you very much. You to me. I hope you'll give me a. And if you want to see a bit more of me, well, I actually don't have anything scheduled quite yet because I'm not sure when I'm working the rest of the week. But next week I'm hoping to bring back the Monopoly. So I'll do a little live from home very soon to roll the dice on the board and decide which location we are exploring. I'll restart the board. I know we've nearly finished the Monopoly board, but new platform, new beginning, so we'll restart the board because I'm still hoping that our group might grow and we might get some new people from YouTube. You have a... Oh, that's not for me. Linda, no, I don't really want to do a sponsorship. I don't, I don't want you to have to pay me anything monthly, and then, what if I'm not very productive that month, or what if I break a leg, or, I don't want to have the pressure to come up with new stuff all the time, or I wouldn't want you to kind of pay and then I don't come up with anything. So I prefer tips. So thank you very much, everyone that was able to leave a tip as well. I know I cannot really thank you individually because I cannot see them when I'm live on YouTube, but make sure they're very much appreciated. If you wanted to do that, I've pinned the links at the top of the chat, and you know what? I think the signal might drop. I feel like I might have tried before, but if you wanted to see a little alleyway that is said to have inspired J.K. Rowling, I don't believe it. J.K. Rowling, she was very much inspired by Edinburgh, not so much London. I'm not sure the signal is going to go, but let me try to show you Godwin's Court. You'll see it's very much very Harry Potter-ish. It's probably going to be quite dark, but yeah. I hope you're still there. I don't know how good the signal is, but yeah, we've got those amazing bow windows. Yeah, it's a bit dark. Where is he? Look at him. Fantastic animals. So yeah, some say that J.K. Rowling's inspired by this little street. Your court. Yes, I knew you'd like the style. It's a bit nicer at daytime because it's not very well lit, but yeah, quite spooky. And it's amazing to have so small and typical street right in the middle of Westminster, Anyway, thank you for coming tonight. Hopefully I'll see you next week in a Monopoly tour. I won't do any the weekend after because I'm going back to Skegness for a job the weekend after. And I don't think I'll reschedule the Skegness tour because I've put it up as a video, the Hego recording, so I don't think many people would come again. Although I don't know, I need to experience with that because I don't know whether people would come again to a tour that they've seen on a video. We'll see. Thanks, Mick. Thanks, Mystery. Thanks, Lethargy. Cool. Have a good evening, a good morning, whatever time it is for you, wherever you are in the world. And I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.